Well, good evening, this is Handlock Steve wishing you a very pleasant evening, and I would like to broach a subject tonight. It's a very edgy subject, it's a difficult topic, it's one that seems to have very few solutions, and it always seems to turn out that when these conversations come up there is all kinds of emotion, bias and baggage surrounding this stuff, and that is of course identity politics, the cancel culture that is prevalent in our society, and the divisions between the different races that are on our planet today. And so I'm going to choose my words carefully because I do not want to get this video taken down, but I would like to broach this subject because it is a difficult one and we do have to address it, and to give you an idea of where I think this will end up going, not just with race but with all kinds of differences, you know, in the LGBTQ community, that kind of stuff, because identity politics always leads in the same direction. Now, this article I picked up, and it is about reparation for the slaves that were brought to North America and who should get reparations, because you see, some people are more deserving than others. So here, let's just read a paragraph from this article and I'll show you the headline and then we'll move on from there, okay? Here we go. And this from The Root. Are only black American descendants of US slaves deserving of reparations? With the nation's renewed focus on whether or how to compensate black Americans for the evils of generations of chattel slavery in the US and its systemically racist aftermath, some have questioned who should qualify for reparations should such reparative justice come to pass. William Sandy Dougherty, a Duke University economic professor and longtime proponent of reparations, tells the Washington Post the answer is simple. Reparations should only go to black Americans directly descended from Americans enslaved on US soil. So, you know, you can quite clearly see that the coloured people who are not going to get reparations are not going to be very happy with the people who did get reparations. So now we have a subdivision within a single race. We have a situation with feminists who don't like transgender, and transgender don't like feminists. Why is that? Because the feminist organization is basically a gender-based organization promoting the whole idea of the female race within our society. And transgender people are against all kinds of gender. Okay, so you can see why, you know, the feminists think that the transgender people are stealing their thunder by denying that their gender exists. And so you can see that what happens when we start going down this path, you get more and more subdivisions the further you go down, the more nitpicking, the more disagreement, the more drama, the more anger, the more separation. And this is just not a solution. This is such a poisonous way to deal with the situation. And this brings to mind, of course, you know, that a house divided against itself cannot stand. And, you know, this is a time when we need to be seeking out allies. We do not need to be making enemies of ourselves, certainly for things that basically no one alive today was responsible for. Most people, I would say the majority of people, certainly in North America, are against racism or prejudice of any kind. I see that most people, there's no doubt about it, there are pockets, there's no doubt about it. I'm sure that if you go down to the Deep South, you know, you're still going to find the lingering effects of, you know, their history on slavery and so on and so forth. But in general, as I say, when you go into an office block or a government office or something, it's a mosaic of people working side by side, basically cooperating with each other to get the job done. So I think a lot of that has disappeared. But of course there are certain groups in our society, and their whole source of strength is this division, is highlighting this division, because without that division, the people who lead that group have no power or authority. Okay, so of course they're going to push this agenda of division, and you know, believe it or not, even though they say that they want to end that divide, they do not want to end that divide. Because if the divide was ended, there would be no reason for them to exist. Okay, there'd be no reason for that group to exist. There would be no anger, because we would be a fully functional and cooperative society. So let me just read this article. It's about cancel culture, and it's something about, something this young girl said when she was 16, and she got booted from college for this racial slur. Okay, so let's just read this article, and I'll come back and we'll wrap up. Okie dokie, here we go. And this from RT. 19-year-old girl booted from college for saying the N-word when she was 15. We need to stand up to cancel culture or we're done for. And this was written by Mika Curtis, and he's a game and tech journalist from the US. Mimi Groves, a student in Virginia, got kicked out of college because of an old Snapchat video of her saying a racial slur. The ex-classmate who exposed her prided himself on this memorable accomplishment. If you'd have asked me before Christmas if I knew who Mimi Groves was, I would probably have asked you if she was a character in a movie. The young Miss Groves has made national headlines here in the United States because someone used a recorded video of her saying a racial slur as a 15-year-old kid to get her kicked out of college. A situation made possible by rampant cancel culture. It's emblematic of a larger sickness in our society. The 3-second tape of Mimi Groves saying, "I can drive N-word," filmed in 2016, was sent over Snapchat to a friend privately, and then it was saved by a young man named Jimmy Galligan. It was second-hand information that he otherwise would never have seen or known about. When asked about the situation, Galligan was unabashedly proud of ruining her life over a mistake that happened years ago, saying, "I'm going to remind myself, you started something. You taught someone a lesson." Jimmy is teaching a lesson all right, but not the one that he's thinking. The lesson he is teaching is that it is completely okay in modern day society to co-opt a good cause, the fight against racism, in this case to signal your own fake virtue, get famous at someone else's expense, or enact petty revenge, or all of the above. Never once does Jimmy or anyone who agrees with him wholeheartedly consider the fact that this is emblematic of a larger problem. As a society, we are becoming okay with revenge. Ask yourself, how many people will be turned from racist thoughts by an 18-year-old flaunting the possible destruction of a former classmate's life prospects over a stupid childhood boast? 0 would be my answer. Many more will learn to fear and loathe the cancel culture he represents. If there is any higher justice, the backlash against it will secure the young woman Galligan tried to ruin a place in higher education. 10 years from now, both individuals are going to look like dumb brats. Mimi will look stupid for casually throwing around racist terminology, and Jimmy will look stupid for being so petty as to try and destroy someone over it. Meanwhile, the rest of our society is left holding the bag. The heart of cancel culture is centered around revenge, envy, and righteous indignation. It is a common tool of someone who enjoys virtue signaling as opposed to actually acting virtuous. There is nothing virtuous in what Jimmy did because revenge is not a virtue. People like him have bred a faux moral monstrosity ready to pounce at a single trigger word. Even though what Mimi did was repulsive, it was years ago, something she says she regrets. Even when the 2016 video was brought to her attention, it was in response to her calling on friends to support Black Lives Matter. So what's the point in destroying her entire future over it? The answer is that there is no point. These types of manoeuvres are seen far too often and only serve the purpose to destroy. Cancel culture by its nature cannot create anything and thus only exists to ruin. It takes people standing up in uncomfortable situations to start bucking the trend and showing people that it's not okay to do this. But cancel culture is all about intimidation, and fewer people are willing to risk sticking their heads up. Thus, we will likely see more kids like Jimmy and Mimi forget the idea of forgiveness and practice revenge. Ultimately, our society is going to have to make a decision. Do we allow this to continue? Are we okay with living in constant fear, trying to gauge every last word we have ever said, even as children, for possible incriminating material that could be used by the likes of Jimmy Galligan? Do we want more lives to be destroyed like this? Do we want our children to become Jimmy Galligans, obsessed with revenge against people that they don't have to interact with? Society needs to start answering these questions, or people are going to have to be a saint just to get ahead in life. And a very specific kind of saint, one approved by the Church of Cancel Culture. So, as you can see, the whole idea of cancel culture is based in revenge, in anger, in separation, in destroying people's lives. And as you can imagine, for the person whose life has been destroyed, they are none too happy about that situation. So not only have you not created an ally, you created an enemy. This person will carry a grudge probably for the rest of their lives, unless they are, as stated in the article, a saint. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is going to be an awful lot easier to say than it is to do. And that is, at some point, all of us, every human on this planet, has to firstly consider themselves as a collective of human beings, not particular races. I mean, as far as I'm talking about a working situation, if you want to keep your culture, if you want to glorify your culture, that's great. Your traditions, I think that's a beautiful idea. But as far as working together on this planet to solve problems, we have to think of ourselves first as human beings. Secondly, we have to, on a particular moment in time, we can choose whenever we like, sooner rather than later, but at that point, when that clock strikes noon, we are all collectively going to forgive each other for the sins of our forefathers and our ancestors, because it was brutal. And I can assure you that there is no race on this planet that has not at some point subjugated, slaved out, attacked, or in some way made some other person in their country have a hard time. Everywhere you go, there is always a group within that race that is segregated and picked on and treated pretty badly. So we're all guilty. This is not particularly a white trait or a black trait or a yellow trait or a green trait or whatever. It's a human trait. It's something that we as humans have to deal with, and whether we did it on a large scale or a small scale, it doesn't really matter, because it was the same thought, it was the same sentiment that generated the idea that you could genocide another race of people or persecute another group of people within your society for whatever reason. That's a shared thought that humans have, and that's what we have to deal with. And the only way to deal with that is to admit that we made some horrible mistakes on our path here, and that we collectively have to forgive each other and move on. And until we do that, we can't move on. We're going to be quagmired in these endless nitpicking arguments. Now, let me give you an example which might bring this down to earth a little bit. Say you have, and I think this is a common experience, say you have an adult child who thought that your parenting skills left a lot to be desired. And you get into this big argument of who could have done better, and all the things that the child did to upset the parent, and all the things the parent did to upset the child, not listening, authoritarianism, you name it, okay? Well, you can continue in hatred and continue to argue about who's right and who's wrong forever. But I think everyone realizes, if you're ever going to have some kind of meaningful, fruitful future relationship, I'm not going to say that you have to forgive and forget, but you have to forgive and accept. Because none of us can change that past. For all the will in the world, not one of us can go back and open up that history and stop what happened. And maybe what happened had to happen to get us here, to get us to this point of realization. And I sure hope that we can transition this point. I don't know how we're going to do it, but until we do, until we forgive each other, we can never move forward into that great future that awaits all of us. Because I think that if we can work cooperatively, there isn't a problem on this planet that we cannot solve. Yes, to assess those problems honestly and to work together to solve them. And God alone knows there are enough problems on this planet without the drama of all of this cancel culture and so on and so forth going on around us. So maybe we can work towards that as we go into the new year, because without it we are not going to resolve these pressing issues. And you can see quite clearly after one look out of your window, or some of the news coming to you from around the world today, that we have some incredibly pressing issues that we have to deal with. We have to deal with it. We're not going to be able to do that if we cannot set out on the same foot to solve these goals without chipping away at each other along the path. Okay, so I know these are lofty goals and wishful thinking maybe, but as I say, if anyone's got any better idea, please. I mean, I know that it is fanciful, but please, if you have a better suggestion as to how we're going to resolve all this, I am open to any and all good suggestions, and then let's get on board. Let's work towards resolving that. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and it hasn't set off too many raw nerves with people. I already had one argument over this because it was taken completely the wrong way. So I hope I haven't upset too many people with this video, and if you did like it, please like, comment and subscribe below. And in the meantime, this is Houndog Steve signing off, wishing you a very pleasant evening, and we'll talk very, very shortly. You take care now. See ya. Bye.